Hi, I'm David with Lighten Up Technologies, the maker of the QBOT, and I'm here today to show you how to install your QBOT on your brand new Juki QVP or Quilt Virtuoso Pro sewing machine like this one here behind me. This is a brand new machine and frame, we just got it in, and I'm going to go through all of the steps installing the drive assemblies, the QBOT head itself, the drive brackets, installing the wires, the drive wires, and making sure that they're properly tensioned, and then finally the wiring harness between the QBOT and those drive assemblies. We'll run a test pattern, make sure all the parameters are set right, and we'll get you quilting with QBOT really soon. Let's start with mounting the Y-axis drive assembly, and what you're going to need for that are the following parts. You're going to need 4 1/4 by 1 inch screws that come in your kit, and 4 1/4 nuts. They also come in your kit. There will be 2 button head screws that look like this. They're very small. I think they're 6mm by maybe 10 or 11mm long, and they use a 4mm or 4.5mm Allen wrench or hex key. Those will mount the drive brackets here. These are the drive brackets. You'll need 2 of those. And then the Y-axis wire holder is this guy right here, and this will mount on the front and back of the lower carriage. So we are going to start with mounting the drive brackets first, and let's get to it. Okay, so what we're going to do is if you're at the front of the sewing machine where the handles are and the touchpad screen for the sewing machine, on the right hand side, so on your right hand side, we're going to mount the drive bracket, one right here on top of this, where this arm comes out. We're going to mount one right there, and we're going to mount one right here on the back. So this is the same side that the Y-axis encoder, that's that thing right here, that controls the stitch regulator. We mount these on the same side as that encoder. So we give those a nice, make them snug, and you see that there's some cutouts here in our bracket to go over the head of that screw. And these are adjustment screws. I believe on this side, however, this is in a fixed position. On the other side of the sewing machine, this little assembly, this track assembly that holds the wheels under here, that can move back and forth. But that doesn't affect the installation of the QBOT drive bracket or the drive motor. So here's the drive motor, and now we're going to attach it to these brackets using the 1/4 by 1 inch long screws and nuts. So I place a screw through the bracket, and then I have a nut, and I thread the nut onto the screw just like that in the front, and then I do the same in the back. Now both the bracket and the drive assembly have some slots in them to make sure that you can get this positioned correctly, and it might take a little time to get that nut in there properly threaded onto the screw, but it doesn't take you a long time. So now, and you can see that there's some play in this, and what you do at this point is you take your Phillips head screwdriver and a 7/16 wrench and tighten that tight. Same in the back here. You take that here and tighten that tight. Now our drive assembly is fully attached. The next step is to put in the Y-axis wire holders, and we do that at the front and back of the carriage. Okay, I'm at the front of the carriage, and I'm going to push the machine away. Just push it to the back so that it's out of my way. And I'm going to block it. My machine right now is not leveled, and I highly recommend leveling your machine before doing this. It just makes things a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mount this to the front of the carriage, just like what I've shown here. And the way I do that is I line up the hole right here with this hole in the carriage, I place a 1-inch long by 1/4 screw and then thread on the nut. And I just want to make that, see that's obviously a little too loose. I'm going to snug that up just a bit, get it where I think it should be, but still has some movement. Now I'm going to go around to the back of the carriage and do the same thing. I'm going to mount the rear Y-axis wire holder to the back, and then we're going to finish up with installation of the Y-axis drive wire, and we're going to tension it. Okay, so now I've put on the back of the carriage, I've put the Y-axis wire holder, and I've attached it loosely like I've done in the front. There's a little bit of play. I've attached one end of the drive wire onto the little hook on the Y-axis wire holder, and I'm about ready to wrap the drive wire around the drive wheel here twice. And we go over the top of the wheel, and we're going to try to capture this so that it's very easy to see how this mounts. The wire goes over the top, then we wrap it once around the drive wheel, and then again around the drive wheel. And this might take you a couple of times because it just seems to be all hands and fingers in there. But we wrap it once and then wrap it twice, just like that. And we keep tension on that wire at all times. So now I have the wire wrapped around the wheel, and I'm holding it. I'm moving the carriage here with my right hand, and I'm holding tension on the wire with my left right here. See, I've got tension on that wire so that it doesn't come off the spool, because once it's on the spool, you kind of want to keep it there. It just makes life easy. Then what I do is I thread I'll just move this back and keep tension on this, but get my hands in the frame. I put the hook of the tensioner into the eye of the wire, and then I put the other end right onto this side of the other wire holder right here. So once that is done, we want to tension the wire. So I keep a little bit of tension with my hand here. This is loose. Now I'm going to turn the center of the turnbuckle, and I turn it this way until there's tension on that wire. You want to be able to hear that noise like that high pitched, and it can almost be a little bit higher like that. You want to make sure that's very tight. Now, we're not done yet, because we have to look at these things right here. These wire holders can move up and down. And what we want to do is we want to be able to sight down this wire. We're going to get our eye level in line with the wire, and we want to make sure that that wire goes straight right across the top of the spool here. We want to make sure from that spool to the ends where it's connected, it is one straight line. That way we know that the wire doesn't have to bend up or down as the carriage travels. Now, it's really important to get that wire straight. When you sight down that wire, you want to be able to look at it and see that it goes, if this is the wheel of the drive motor, you want to see that that wire goes straight over the top into the other end. If you see that it goes up, hits the top of the wheel, and then comes down, that's like a tent or a chevron, upside down chevron. We don't want that. We don't want it to be like this. So you move those endpoints, which are the wire holders. You pivot them until everything's aligned, and once they're pivoted in place, you tighten them up with the Phillips screwdriver and the 7/16 wrench. Then you're done with that part, and we can move on to the X-axis. Now we're ready to mount the X-axis drive bracket and drive assembly. And what I recommend is to mount the drive bracket to the drive assembly first, and then mount the assembly to the bottom of the carriage. And I'll show you how to do that. This is what it looks like right here. So we have a drive bracket, that's this metal piece up here, and it's got some big holes and some holes that are on angles right here, and then you can see here's a bunch of holes because it's kind of a universal bracket for all of our QBOT assemblies that we do for our different frames. Well, the drive assembly mounts into the end slots here, or the screws go through the end slots, and I put the screws in from this side, from the drive assembly side, through the drive assembly, and then tighten them with this 1/4 20 nut in the back, and we use a 7/16 wrench to do that. So I recommend doing this first. You get this assembly to this state right here, and then we mount this underneath the carriage, and the process is pretty simple, and we're going to get a camera angle up under there so you can see how that mounts. It just mounts with 2 screws that are already part of the lower carriage. We loosen them with a 4mm wrench, and then place the bracket up in there, up underneath, and then tighten the screws back up. So let's do that. Alright, so what this angle is right here is we're looking out, looking underneath the carriage. I'm looking up at the bottom of the carriage from the floor up underneath like that. And if I pan up, you can see that there is the machine standing, towering over us. So there is the machine, and here is the lower carriage, and we are at the front of the lower carriage. So what we do is we take our assembly that we did with the X-axis drive bracket and the X-axis drive motor, and we come under here, find a comfortable position on the floor. I like to put the screw into the bracket first, and then put my wrench into the screw, hold it up, and tighten it up like that. Just a little snug, and then I'm going to do the same thing at the other end. I tighten it up just like this. These have slots so that we can position this to get everything lined up. Here we go. Keep everything a little bit loose until everything fits nicely. Then tighten these up. Snug, snug, and then go ahead and put some force on it and tighten these up. So that's that. That X-axis drive assembly is now attached. Next step is to put the X-axis wire holders and then run the drive wire over the X-axis drive motor. One of the last steps now is to mount the X-axis drive wire, and we have these wire holders right here that do that for us. Actually, we have to install them, and then they will hold the wire. These are kind of a neat looking bracket. They've got a nice shape to them, and you'll see the reason for that shape is once we install it on the frame, this little piece here keeps the bracket from rotating and spinning. So we use an existing hole that's already in the frame, and there's already a screw there. We use a I think it is a 5mm, yep, a 5mm wrench to loosen that screw, and then we place our bracket on each side. So let's do that. I'll get the camera positioned up underneath the frame. You can see that real quick. It takes about maybe a minute to install these. Okay, here we are at the end of the frame. So if I pan down, you can see the lower, I think that's the batting bar for this frame, and I climb up a little bit, and I see the end bar for the frame, and you can see the curvature of that curved upper piece. Well, I'm underneath that, where it's the post that holds, it's the main post of the frame right here, and it goes down to the floor and meets that junction there. Well, the hole I'm looking at is this one right here. This one right here. That's where we are going to place the X-axis drive wire holders, and we do this on each side, on each end of the frame. So let's get this one mounted first. You have to get down on the floor to do this, but it goes like this. We have this is what that holder looks like, and what we do is we take that with this piece toward the frame, we mount it up underneath, and put the original screw back in. And now you see that little piece keeps that from pivoting too far. It holds the distance. So you have it up against the frame like that, and then tighten it up. And that's it. That's all there is to that. And we do the same thing on the other side of the frame. Alright, so I've wrapped the wire twice over the top of the X-axis drive wheel. Similar to the Y-axis drive wheel, we wrap twice so that the wire goes over the top. Same for the X-axis. And now I've got some tension on it. I'm holding tension here just a little bit so that it doesn't come flying off that wheel. And what I do is I use my other tensioner and then place it on just like that. And then I hold this end. I don't want to twist the wire. I want to twist the barrel. So you twist the barrel to apply tension to it. And because the X-axis wire is kind of long, you can apply quite a bit of tension to this. You don't want to have it real floppy. You do want to have a nice tone to it. Now this tone will vary based on where the carriage is. If the carriage is very close to this end, it's going to be a high pitch, and if it's at the other end, it's going to be a little bit of a lower pitch. But you want a nice tension on that. That guarantees that the registration and the positioning of the QBOT is correct. So let's move on to now attaching the QBOT head and finalize everything with the wiring harness routing and tidying things up. Okay, I'm at the top of the machine now, and I've removed these two screws. There were two screws that held this bracket on top of the machine, just like that. So I took those out using my 4mm wrench, and QBOT has a bracket that matches these two holes. So what we do is, using the original screws that came with the machine, we just attach our QBOT bracket through the original bracket down to the machine, first just snugly, and once both screws are in, we give them a good final tighten. And that's it. Now the QBOT head is attached. So the last thing we want to do now is attach the wiring harness, and I can give you some tips on that to keep everything tidy. We'll power this up and check the parameters to make sure everything is going in the right direction. Alright, so we have everything set up as far as the mechanics are concerned. Let's take a look at the stuff that we need to do, and as far as the parameters are concerned for the QBOT. So let's arrow over. You can use the right arrow or left over. Go over to options, say OK, and then setup, OK. You can use metric or not. I choose to use imperial units, so I say no to metric. Scroll down. You want to set your X-axis direction value to 1. So if it is, the default is -1, so you select 1 and then press go or yes, and it'll save that setting. Then you go back into setup, and you want to make sure that your Y-axis direction is also set at 1. The wheel diameter is 22.3 millimeters, that's fine. Motor current, you need to set that to 70. And after you set that to 70, always remember to press the go to save it, and then go back into settings. Speed control on delay, you want that set to 200 with this machine. Speed control off delay, 2000 is fine. Motors enable delay, 200, fine. Motors disable delay, you want to set that to 3000 with this machine. Acceleration factor of 2000, delta factor 0.7, and that's about it. That's all we have to worry about that. Once you're set with that, you can say OK, it saves the settings, and you're back in business. So that's about it on that. Now the other thing is, I've got my wiring harness plugged in, and I've put my strain relief pads onto the sewing machine in these locations, and then I use wire ties to hold the power cable and all of the drive motor cables nice along. They're nicely placed along the sewing machine down to the bottom here, and then I tie off in a little loop, a little bow. I tie off the power supply extra cord. I run the X-axis. I have a strain relief pad here and here, one up here, and then one right here, and that keeps that wire from getting connected or getting caught on anything as it goes forward to back. You want to be sure that nothing gets caught when you move the carriage forward to back. And then the y-axis wire I take down to the bottom of the machine there. It goes underneath the bottom of the machine, comes around the side like that, and then plugs into the drive assembly right there. And that's basically it. Please take the time to tidy all of your wires up. It's very important that you do that so nothing gets caught and it doesn't interrupt your quilting. Okay, so we're ready to try our test pattern to make sure everything's working properly. If you have sent your handlebar set in from your sewing machine, for us to add in the QBOT connector cord, which would then plug into the top of the QBOT here, right here at the top. If you've sent that in, then the QBOT will automatically start and stop the sewing machine at the beginning and ending of quilting. So let's show that first. If we go into quilt and we'll choose our test design and 2-point scaling, keep proportion, yes, go equal move to start. It's moving to the start point, and then we press go to quilt. As soon as I press go, it then starts the sewing machine and will then stop the sewing machine automatically at the end of quilting. So at the end of quilting, it has automatically stopped the sewing machine. Now, if you don't have that, upgrade to your handles, then we're going to mimic that now. I'm going to unplug the cable from the top of the QBOT, and this would be as if you just have the handlebars independent of the QBOT assembly. So we're going to start this again and go to the start point. Now at this point we've got to first click the button here, and then after we start the machine, then we have to press go on QBOT. So I'm going to do that relatively quickly here. We press the start on the machine starts, and then press go on QBOT. And then we're quilting again. And at the end of quilting, you will want to stop with the handlebar so that you don't get a lot of stitches at the very end. So I just stopped it with the handlebar again. So that's about it, and that's the way the test pattern should run. If you have set up your parameters correctly, it should first go away from you, and then to the right, and then back to the start point in a square. And that's about it. I hope you enjoy your QBOT, and happy quilting.